Hello again, everybody. Before I get into the main subject material for what this channel will be going over, I figured I should probably get into the basics of what paleontology actually is, a bit of its history, and why studying rocks made from the permineralized bones of animals that haven't existed for thousands to millions of years actually matters. Well, putting it like that makes it sound like it doesn't matter, but I promise you it does.
Aardvark abating, a pet abdicating, a band and a base and a breast.
Paleontology, as I crudely explained, is the field of science concerning the collection and study of fossilized animals and plants. Now, some of that may sound boring, and that's because it kind of is. Chiseling and brushing at rock for hours in some of the harshest conditions you will ever be put in, only to find a 2 centimeter long piece of bone that you may never be able to confidently identify because of how fragmentary it is, isn't something that I personally find that engaging or appealing. In my opinion, the real fun comes in the form of the implications and speculations that are made from studying fossils. We'll be talking about those in many videos to come. Now that we've defined paleontology, we should talk about the people who truly defined paleontology. Though there were most likely observations of fossils made by prehistoric peoples, the first documented paleontological work came from a pretty prestigious source: Golden Age Greece. The writings of
Xenophanes, Herodotus, Eratosthenes,
and
Strabo
all wrote about fossilized marine organisms, and used those findings to correctly theorize that the land was at one point underwater. About 1,000 years later, Persian naturalist
Ibn Sina
would document the fossils he found in his book, aptly named The Book of Healing, which was basically the guide to the natural world for someone living in the Middle Ages. In Chinese naturalist, you know what, I'm just going to be doing this for everybody now,
Shen Kuo
would propose a climate change theory by studying petrified bamboo. These are just more examples of people figuring stuff out thousands of years ago, only for those in the modern era to outright deny it. Thank you all for your service. During the 17th and 18th century, the study of fossils and their relation to the past became more understood. It was during this time that fossils gave
George Cuvier
the evidence to prove that extinction was even a thing that happens. Despite all this activity and study on fossils, it wasn't until 1822 when this field of science was even given a name. The term was first used in a French scientific journal made by the naturalist.
Henri-Marie Ducrot de Blainville.
A few decades later, paleontology would be a component in helping another naturalist with his little fringe theory. That person's name was
Charles Darwin.
After he released The Origin of Species, paleontological attention was shifted towards trying to understand the evolutionary paths of extinct organisms and linking them to living ones. This is a view that has continued to this day. Now that we have that out of the way, let's go more in depth about what some of these guys were finding, specifically a group of enigmatic reptiles that would propel paleontology into the mainstream. That group would be known as the
Holy fucking shit, it's a dinosaur!
What would a video on paleontology be without dinosaurs? They were the catalyst for my interest in paleontology, and were most likely yours too. The first ever dinosaur to be discovered and given an official name was Megalosaurus, a very generic theropod. It was first described in a publication released in 1763, which, as many of you
Patriotic, red-blooded, God-fearing, gun-toting Americans
know, is 3 years before the Declaration of Independence was signed. Though it wasn't originally called Megalosaurus. Instead, due to the shape of the fossil, it was given the name Scrotum humanum. That's right, the first dinosaur name was a dick joke. This name would remain until
William Buckland
described its lower jaw and gave it the name we would use today. 1 year later, the ornithischian dinosaur Iguanodon, one of the most important dinosaur discoveries in history, would be officially named by
Gideon Mandel.
Iguanodon deserves its own video, but until it gets made, just take my word for it that the discovery of a large herbivorous reptile was a revolutionary one for the field. The third dinosaur to be named, also by
Gideon Mandel.
was called Hylaeosaurus, but nobody cares about that one. These three specimens would be noticed by
Richard Owen.
and would be the foundation for his newly created order of animals he would call Dinosauria. Like most scientific developments, their views on how dinosaurs looked and behaved are nowhere near as accurate as they are today. Because they were reptiles, their assumptions were that these were slow, stupid, swamp-dwelling animals, that they were an evolutionary experiment destined to fail and give way to the mammals. This is why, despite being immensely popular with the public at large, they weren't actually that favored in some areas of the paleontological community. Some were more interested in studying the superior mammals who overtook the dinosaurs as rulers of the earth. Since then, those misconceptions have been corrected through the nearly 1,000 non-avian dinosaur species discovered and studied. That leads us to the modern era, and how paleontology is done today. Though there is still paleontological work done out in the field, many new discoveries and species have been found in museums. This is because we have tons of archived specimens that haven't been touched for easily 100 years, so their placement and classification can be updated when we rediscover them. As of right now, billions of individual fossils have been discovered, composing 250,000 species across every kingdom from all over the planet. Where dinosaurs are concerned, we now know their evolutionary links to birds, their colors and patterning, their behavior, their soft tissue anatomy, and so much more. Paleontology has told us so much about the mechanisms for how the natural world works, such as climate change, ecology, evolution, and deep time. None of these ideas and discoveries would have been nearly as understood today if it wasn't for those pioneering scientists who came before.
You need to shut the fuck up!
TLDR, paleontology's pretty epic. For my next video, I will be talking about Jack Horner, so that should be fun. Until then, thank you and goodbye. We'll be talking about those and many— FUCK!